year, on 5th of June, we celebrate World Environment Day. And celebrating World Environment Day means that young people and across the globe and people in various sectors come together to harmonize on issues that are affecting our environment. So with me today, we shall be discussing World Environment Day. Should nature conservation take precedence over human development projects? So with me on this panel, I am joined by distinguished lady and gentlemen who will help us dissect the topic today. And the people that I'm joined with on this panel are people who have experience and expertise on issues related to environment. So right to my left, I am joined by a lawyer and politician. He goes by the name Mr. Maseruka Sadat. He will introduce himself to all you the audience out there, so that you can get to know him better. Right after Mr. Sadat, we are joined by a face that is familiar to this show. She goes by the name of Miss Regina. Miss Regina, welcome to the show. And right after Miss Regina, we are joined by a gentleman who it's his maiden day and to appear on the Youth Roundtable, Mr. Asimwe Roy. Thank you for joining us. So I'll begin with you, Mr. Sadat. Kindly introduce yourself and you let the audience know who you are.
Well, fellow viewers, Sadat Maseruka is my name. As Zala introduced, yes, I'm a lawyer by profession, and passionate about politics and the environment. In issues of the environment, I work with Tree Adoption Foundation, and I do head the programs in that organization. So I'm the head of programs at Tree Adoption Foundation, where we talk about the conservation vis-a-vis the existence of our development. In most cases, we are trying to tell the public out there that whereas we are passionate about conserving the environment as it is, but we must also find means of coexisting within that very environment. So we are shaping a conversation regarding the polluter pay principle and environment vis-a-vis development.
As I've heard, just from that introduction, you can clearly see that this is someone who knows what he's talking about and is the right man for the job today on this panel. So right next to Mr. Sadat, we're joined by a lady by the name Regina. Regina, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much, moderator. It is very so good to be back here. My name is Regina Namugerwa. I work with Tree Adoption Uganda as a project officer. I am also a Rotary actor. When I am not in tree adoption work, I do Rotary work. It's voluntary work. And what Tree Adoption Uganda does precisely is tree growing with the aid of technology, environmental education, and as well as waste management for climate action. So it is so good to be here. I really look forward to the discussion. My blood is thriving with the anticipation. I cannot wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. I'm also anticipating a very fruitful and interesting conversation. Yeah. Just by the introduction, I am already anticipating so much. So let me go to you, Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, introduce yourself and you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm Asimwe Roy. I'm an IT professional. Though I love calling myself an IT freelancer.
Yes.
Yeah. And my good vibes with the environment. I love going to the ghettos to preach it via kind of like a gospel.
True.
Because I love reading about clean energy. And because I'm in the field of IT, so I love doing it in terms of reaching out to the young generation to teach them on how to live with the environment. Because remember, the moment we spoil it right now, we are killing like 1 million generations.
True.
So I'm also anticipated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the conversation.
Just from your introduction, yes, you bring out the aspect of technology, which is very key in protecting our environment. Thank you, and we're very humbled to have you on this show. So I'll begin with you, Mr. Sadat. From your introduction, you mentioned that you work with Tree Green Foundation, and Tree Green Foundation is the mother of the Environment Parliament.
Yes.
And today's discussion, we are looking at we are looking at whether nature conservation should take precedence over human development. yeah, human development projects. So I would like you to put into perspective, first of all, strike a balance between nature conservation and human development in a rapidly growing world, in the context of Uganda.
Nature conservation is the preservation, to the extreme, is the preservation of what we have in terms of the environment for now and the future.
Yes.
Human capital development or human development in terms of having employment, income, and sustainability development is on the other side actions of an individual that they use to modify the environment so that they can sustainably sustain themselves in this country. So in Uganda, you will find that the environment conservation policies are in most cases are in contrast with the development of an individual. Take for instance, when you find that the policies on conservation of riverbanks, swamps, and lake shores are to one extent hindering the development of factories, the establishment of beaches, and all sorts of other human capital development activities. So we are saying as Story Grown Foundation that whereas we are preserving the environment, whereas we want this environment, the earth that we are on, to be sustained, we must also realize that the people that we are trying to sell that agenda to must actually live today. So you'll find that one will ask you whether should we reclaim the swamp to build a factory to employ thousands of people, or should we preserve the swamp as it is? In most cases, there must be a striking of a balance. The importance of the swamp is fundamentally documented. But at the same time, we should also acknowledge that people need employment, people need jobs. So in this regard, we must put up what we call the polluter pay principle mechanisms. And I'm glad that the name under the 2019 Act came up with the policies or with laws that actually talk about the polluter pay principle. You pay for what you pollute. If, for instance, you establish a factory in Namave, the carbon emissions that you emit, you must consistently pay for environment impact assessment reports that will use to clean up what you have destroyed. In this regard, you will find that world over, industrial companies pay a huge amount of money to clean up what they have destroyed. That in that regard, that they create jobs, at the same time they are cognizant of the fact that at the end of the day, we must clean up where you are working from. So the campaign that we are driving is that whereas we are pushing for environmental conservation, it should not be in the isolation of other players. These players are also fundamental in the society. They create employment and they have the money and they will defy the policies if we do not put up mechanisms for them that can sustainably allow them to operate within the existing circumstances. We look at companies like Coca-Cola, companies like the bottling companies. Look at factories. They pollute the environment, but at the same time, they have a role in cleaning that environment. So we want to bring them together under the polluter pay principle. You pollute, fine, but you must pay for cleaning up your own damages. You are carrying out, you establish a beach on the lake shores. Yes, you attract tourists. At the end of the day, they throw bottles, whatnot, in the riverbanks and in the lakes. There must be a principle whereby you pay for cleaning up. Not to say that it is prohibited to plant, to establish factories in swamps. They will defy, because at the end of the day, humans will need jobs. They will need to sustainably live.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Regina, listening to Mr. Sadat, he brings out the polluter pay principle. In my head, or even the viewers out there, how he brings it out is, you pay for the pollution you emit to the environment. And from just the face of it, imagine I establish a company, and I know my company would emit enormous fumes to the environment that would detrimentally affect the environment. But I know, because I am a capitalist and I have the money, I'll pay for the pollution I've made. Don't you think we move 5 steps forward and 10 steps backwards, Miss Regina, from that political?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, moderator. Early May, that is, I think, from 1st to 5th, we celebrate Air Quality Awareness Week, which is totally in relation to what you have said. And yes, before I even continue or go any further, I would like to say that the environment is all we know. It is our alpha. It is our omega. I mean, you come into the environment from, I don't know, for those who believe, from wherever you've come from, and you disappear into the environment. It is all we know. It is all we have. And all these measures, for example, for air quality, for the post setup industries and all that, when you say that we move a step and several steps behind, it is actually right, especially for countries like Uganda that are developing. You see, in Uganda is where you hear news that someone killed another for a piece of bread. What does that impose to you, which even takes me in response to his discussion? All these things have to be ultimately realized all together. And I just want to center my discussion on the SDGs. They are 17, but you cannot. We love the environment, yes, and all that, and Tree Adoption Uganda is a climate action organization. But then we cannot come and say that now we are going to advance only this SDG, maybe SDG 15, which is life on land. See, when someone is hungry, and allow me to use the word hunger as a metaphor, when someone is hungry for clean and efficient energy, when someone is hungry for employment, when someone is hungry for good education, when someone is hungry for good health, you cannot come and tell them that, you know what, now that you cannot afford to go and get meds, please now preserve that tree, which he would have cut and sold to get that money. See, all these things work hand in hand. And we have a very big role to play, CSOs and the government as well.
All right. You use a very good juxtaposition of the SDGs to bring out the aspect of sustainable development. I'd like to engage with you, Mr. Roy. From the conversation we get from Ms. Regina and Mr. Sadat is, for us to survive, we need to sustainably develop. And we know of a few examples of countries that have achieved that. Denmark, the Scandinavian countries, among others. Do you think, from the gospel that you're preaching in the ghetto, because you know that in the ghettos, people, first of all, do not have access to clean water.
True.
People in the ghettos do not have access to places of convenience when they want to ease themselves. Now, as you're preaching that gospel to someone down there in the ghetto, what tool or how do you preach the gospel in the event that they do not have access to this water, they do not have access to clean toilets, to dispose their waste? How do you then achieve sustainable development as you're preaching the gospel in the ghetto?
Now, you see, now like Uganda, we have a kind of behavior whereby we ourselves don't want to first learn. And learning is through kind of reading. But now some people don't have access to reading. But what I always do, I always go on a word-on-word point of view, because I always preach to my people. For example, that if you look at someone smoking, you might think that he's the only polluter of the environment. But you forget that you yourself, even when you buy a bottle of soda and throw it in a certain stream, or you throw it anywhere, you're killing even more than the person smoking a cigarette. So I always engage them in a kind of me sharing at least what I've read on a word-on-word point of view, because some people are hard when it comes to have a chance of like, when it comes to reading material, it's very hard. So you would rather go and face them and talk to them, and you're like, you know what, you're killing a generation that you yourself, that you might not be affected by the kind of the thing you're doing, but your grandsons and so on will be, they will suffer the things that you're doing. So may I think, this other point of like going on the ground and talking to the people themselves would be a better option, because Ugandans are big-headed. I'm sorry to say that, because they kind of act like as if these things don't affect them or don't matter. And even the politicians themselves or these other kind of elites normally use the spaces they use, like Twitter, social media campaigns. But very few people down there on the ground know these things.
True.
But when you go down on the ground and talk to a person face to face, he can at least understand the point where you're coming from. Because when you explain to them the effects of what they are doing, because for example, I'll copy a leaf from a don from Akere is called Dr. Apollo Vilejea. Sorry if it's that name, but he even gave a history whereby like Lake Victoria has ever dried. But if you tell someone, they won't accept, because it dried like 400,000 years back, to the point of like whereby even people used to go through it. But because it was human behaviors of not listening, so when you bring such stories to the people and tell them that, you know that even Lake Victoria has ever dried, people would bet. So
True.
me, my gossip is to do a face-to-face.
Raising awareness.
Raising awareness.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Drake, if you'll allow me to react to his conversation. And yes, that is very true. There is really big need for us to go to the ground, to the grassroots, because these are the people that actually need these things most. But they have not understood what it's about. They have no idea.
They have no
See,
idea.
when NEMA did that administrative penalty, they projected it on social media and maybe on their websites in English. Well, how many people speak English or even understand it? He talked about reading. Most of this material is in English. How many people have gone to school? No, especially in the ghetto, very few. There are very few. And I just want to point out that aspect. I think council will bear me witness. There is a thing called natural law. If adults have understood what these things are about, don't you think in their nurturing of their children, they will somehow inculcate it there? That, you know what, where we had or we learned in a workshop X or on the radio in our language that plastic will do this and this. So you, my 3-year-old son, this is what you should do. When you drink soda, which you love so much, put the bottle here or do this and this. Right from when they are young. I think these services, these teachings, this education, I'll call it an education, needs to come down to a language people understand, in ways they understand and can easily relate.
Okay, thank you. From the conversation that I picked from Roy and from your submission, in addition to what he says, he brings out a strategy that has been going on, that is raising awareness and campaigns. And it's true that when information is being disseminated to the audience out there, it should be put out in languages people understand. It's not it's not that everyone out there understands English. But let us come back to this conversation. I'd like to engage with you, Councillor Sadat. In your earlier submission, you brought out the aspect of polluter pay principle. And I asked you, I asked Ms. Regina of the effectiveness, whether this polluter pay principle is us taking 5 steps forward and 10 steps backwards. And she submitted, and she gave her thoughts. Now, my question to you now comes to the relevant strategies we ought to, effective strategies to employ to mitigate environmental impact of development projects. Should we focus only on this polluter pay principle? Because in my understanding, I feel like that is not enough. For people who study environment law, there is what they call the precautionary principle. Yes, where it's more of a preventive measure that we need to employ. Should we then employ strategies like effective should we employ measures like environmental impact assessment before industries or projects are actually put into place?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. I will first of all, in two folds, react to the submissions of the previous panelists. It is true that people need to be informed of their obligations towards conserving the environment. However, we should also acknowledge the fact that it is the people that we call the illiterate that actually are holding our environmental conservation activities and they are following them to the latter. It is worrisome that mostly the people that we regard as to be elites, as educated, that are the ones that are what we call in denial of the changes in the environment. And what we did by organizing the Environment Parliament was to bring the citizens, the local people to the core in decision making while they are making policies and legislations regarding the environment. It is that the elites will make a decision basing on their utopia and elite capture, but they will there is always need to engage the people at various grassroots or at various localities, because they are the ones that put these policies into practice, and at the same time they are the very people that are affected most by these changes in the environment. So it is not true that they do not know what to do. And by the laws of nature, people have grown up knowing that if I cut down a tree, I must plant another, because my grandfather planted this tree and it did not bear fruits during his lifetime. It is me that is enjoying those fruits. Therefore, I should also plant trees for my children and grandchildren. It is common knowledge amongst the population. But the growth and advancement in technology, it has brought in another perspective. Now I'm going to the question of asked. Environment impact assessment is as a result of the advancement in technology, the advancement in the needs of human beings. The way we design to use the environment for our survival has brought us to the extent of realizing that people need houses, people need jobs, people need consumables. Therefore, there must be establishment of factories, and at all the time there will be pollution. But as you read the NEMA Act of 2019, you will find that they will put up measures that if you were to establish such a category of factory, there must be a license that is not cheap to get, because under the polluter pay principle, it is also a precautionary measure that if you cannot afford to pay a license of 6 billion to establish a factory of such a magnitude in regards to the pollution and emissions, you cannot establish that. But at the same time, you are always assessed over time if you are not polluting beyond the measures that are controllable. Why am I saying so? That it is the way to go to accept that we need oil and gas, which must be drilled, which at the end of the day, the chemicals must be emitted through the environment. But how are we going to use this oil at the same time keep that very environment still sustainable for all of us? Because even if we say that we're not going to drill oil, the demand for oil will supersede the demand for environmental conservation. A live example is when you go to areas like Bududa, there is a lot of land fragmentation, and they are farmers by nature. They know that fragmentation and planting on the steep slopes is dangerous. But then at the end of the day, he has a family to feed.
There's a greater need.
He will ask you, now, should I leave this land my grandfather left me with, bequeathed me to, and my children suffer and die of hunger, or should I first save my children from hunger. So we should always accept that the advancement and the growth that we are at the moment requires us to put up measures that pollution is with us. Environmental degradation is with us. Land fragmentation because of an increase in population is with us. But what measures are we putting so that whereas those are all amidst us, we must at the same time preserve the environment? The polluter pay principle comes into place. Thank you.
You're really stuck to the polluter pay principle.
Yes.
And I think from the conversation that you bring, it makes much more sense that when industries are being established, they should definitely, pay a particular amount of money to protect the environment, which from your submission, I am inclined to agree that it's a way to go. But allow me to engage you, Miss Regina. We see countries like Denmark, which is the leading country in terms of sustainable development. They have possibly achieved most of the SDGs. You talked about they have strived to solve gender inequality, they have zero hunger, no poverty, among others. And you realize when you're discussing or having a conversation relating to environment, definitely sustainable development is something we talk about. And be that we are in a developing country like Uganda, how can our government ensure that there is sustainable development when industries are being established?
Okay, thank you so much. How can government ensure that there is sustainable development when industries are being
Established.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. From my experience and interaction with various agencies and departments here, and with individuals, you realize that there is a very big issue, which I will call, should I call it bandwagon signing? It is like you get, for example, you have been in the desert for so long, you're looking for a job and you finally get this job, you are handed the contract and you just go straight to the signature. Without reading. You're just excited that, yes, I have a job, whatever else comes, I do not care. That mentality or that mindset is what is inhabiting Ugandans today, Ugandans as individuals, Ugandans as investors, Ugandans as manufacturers, Ugandans even in the government space. See, he talked about the NEMA Act and the guidelines that one should follow before they set up, one should follow before they establish a manufacturing plant. There are so many proceedings. With an act comes regulations, which you must read and to the dot follow. But if we do an assessment, and if someone has really read them and followed them to the dot, certain things wouldn't be happening today as they are happening. What does that mean? Government has also neglected that part. Should I call it an enforcement mechanism? If there is a license that must be got, the procedure for getting this license should be followed to the dot. All the administrative procedures should be followed to the dot. These things of kitu kidogo, just because someone has offered more money than the other over a swamp, should not be there. If we are not reclaiming a swamp, then we should not reclaim it. There has to be very strict enforceability for these procedures in the law and also the regulations as well. So, well, I commend the government for where they have done something in some of these procedures, but yes, it is an ongoing struggle for each and every single day to realize that most of these procedures are not followed, and they should come up and ensure that they are enforced to the dot, not just perusing and putting a signature, but reading to the dot and ensuring that everything is followed to the dot as mandated. So there is government needs to come up, do the enforcement work much more stronger than they have been doing before, do the implementation work much more stronger than they have been doing before, review these procedures and know what is lacking. If in the other year, our biggest problem maybe was maybe was the land tenure or the land system and how it is, and therefore because of the nature of this land you must not do this, then we shall know today in 2023 what is the major problem in relation to manufacturers and them setting up here. Review and know that the procedures the other side or the other years are different from what is on the ground today. Get that problem and relate it to the laws. Review the laws in relation, and those laws are the procedures we are talking about, and those procedures must be followed to the dot.
Okay. Allow me to stick with you before I bring Mr. Roy.
Yes.
You talk about strict enforceability.
Yes.
And recently the president passed an executive order to districts in northern Uganda, Agagwa, Moro, Kikom, Gulu, on grounds of people to stop charcoal burning and tree cutting. And we've seen the executive order at the moment has been followed stringently with very dire consequences if you're caught cutting trees and burning charcoal. You talk about sustainable development. Of course, among the SDGs, we look at no poverty, zero hunger. Families derive their sustenance from the charcoal burning that they engage in. They get money to pay for their children's fees. They get money from the charcoal burning business to feed themselves. Now, does that order, in one way or the other, depict strict enforceability in a positive sense or in a negative sense? Or should we look at it from the angle that, yes, we are conserving our environment at the detriment of the communities or the citizens that we serve?
You said it right. Conserving our environment to the detriment of the citizens that we serve. In such a situation where someone is wholly dependent, they have established themselves and they are wholly dependent on that forest. And now you say, strictly, this shall be that when you burn charcoal, when you cut down a tree, you are going to face this penalty. And these penalties have their consequences. What alternative is there? What alternative is there? And you as a government or as a government agency, what are you doing? You are the custodian of the people, and everything is supposed to be done in a fair and equitable manner. Now, there is a difference between equality and equity. So if this society have been looking at this forest for their sustenance, for all the other things I mentioned, health, education, you want every child to be educated, you want to have you want to go to a hospital and be able to afford, with some money, of course. Where are you getting the money from? Charcoal burning. So when you remove that charcoal burning, you as government, what is the alternative? Have you even told these people or made them understand what charcoal burning really means to them? Some people don't even know things like the amount of carbon in the atmosphere or the ozone layer. That is gibberish to them. They do not understand those things. So when you do that, you have not made them understand that it is actually a bigger danger to them. You have not given them an alternative that, you know what, instead of burning the charcoal, you can use your organic waste to make briquettes that you can use instead of charcoal. You have not given them or even assisted them with an alternative that, you know what, we can support you to explore. These are the economic means. All that has not been done. But when a directive comes overnight, it looks like the pure gospel. It looks like the best thing to do. But like he said, all these things work in relationship with each other, hand in hand. And it takes me back to my metaphor, the hunger. You're hungry for a habitat, you have nowhere to go. Why should I leave the riverbank? To go where? You're hungry for a good employable system, yes, but you're telling me to not cut down the tree, to not sell my charcoal so that I have a meal at the end of the day. Doesn't make sense at all. So yes, you're right. Some of these things are to the detriment of the people we are protecting. And how can that be remedied? Find solutions that are going to work hand in hand with each other.
Thank you. Find solutions that are going to work hand in hand with each other. Perfect. I'd like to engage with you, Mr. Roy.
Yeah.
From our conversation, I pick something to do with clean energy, and
Yeah.
that is something you're interested in.
Yeah.
And you are an IT freelancer,
Yeah.
and you know we are an ever-changing world.
Yeah.
We are seeing that we have grown worlds that have embraced clean energy, and Uganda we're also slowly but surely embracing. Yesterday, if you are to see Total when they were celebrating the World Environment Day, Total made a pledge that they are going to try their level best to put plants of charging ports for electric vehicles.
True.
Being someone that is interested in clean energy, I know a conversation of electric cars would not benefit someone that is down there, and they wouldn't want to know about it. But if you are given the capacity, as you said, you preach the gospel of clean energy. You know, very many people down there possibly use a lot of charcoal.
Lord.
People use firewood. How best can you preach to them that we need to possibly come up with an alternative? Or what alternative do you have to preach to them for us to adopt clean energy?
Yeah, first of all, I'll supplement on our point. You see, the government wakes up and says that people should stop on what? Using charcoal.
Yeah.
But they don't give options, or they don't offer like services of going down to teach people on how they can either opt from the charcoal. Now me, I use it like an advantage of whereby I train some of these guys on how to make liquids. Yeah, because it's also technology.
True.
Yeah, because you'll use your YouTube, copy a few skills, then bring them to these people down. That in case of you using the charcoal or firewood, at least you can do this. Then you preach to them what are you saving them from? You get, because the government just talks about it, but it never comes on ground. Because I will give an example of like the rail part. If you've ever used that road going to Mbara, Masaka, because there is a guy who wrote a very nice article on how those guys should stop growing rice from that part. They refused. And remember, those things, the swamps work like kidneys for the what? For the lake, because they keep on regulating water. What happened? The road got what? Destroyed. Now, so when the people that preach, for example, what you've been saying, like for what she was saying about the government, when it just wakes up and bans people from using charcoal without providing like an alternative, they are lying to themselves. At least even an alternative doesn't need them to put in a lot of money.
True.
At least it can even send some people on ground to teach these people, because they are not fools. At least they can learn. Teach them, because you don't need to go and buy a gas cylinder for you to go and cook your food. But come on ground and teach them on how to do what?
To use
a very other alternative. Then on the issue of the technology, me, what I always preach with these people down here, because I always tell them, yeah, the technology is there, it's coming, but many of us don't have that money to do what? To purchase stuff like that. But now, me always engage them in a way that, because there are some young guys who normally come up with alternative like modes of bicycles that normally use what? Batteries. They're in the ghettos. There are guys who are very creative.
Innovative,
Yeah. Me always preach them to always go on with such, to always support the young guys like those. Because first of all, the government never comes in to support such innovations. It is always left to the person to hustle his way out. So when you go on talking to a few people, very many people are always eager to support their own. Because when I come up with something creative, they will always come in to support than you run into the government.
True.
Yeah, so that's how I preach it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. From the conversation that I pick from all the panelists just right now is the aspect of the stakeholder perspective. That before the government comes up with policies and legislation, they should first of all pick the stakeholder perspective. And who are the stakeholders? The local community, the investors, among others. Of which that is something from the submissions that I've picked from Ms. Regina and Mr. Roy, is that government have failed, particularly in their role of picking the stakeholder perspective, particularly in the communities that are down there in northern Uganda, who they have received an executive order to stop cutting down trees. Now, let's engage you, Councillor Sadat. You work with Tree Green Foundation,
Yes.
and you are the mother of Environment Parliament, and you focus on seeing that there is sustainable development vis-a-vis as staying on the environment. Now, this brings me to the conversation, considering the stakeholder perspective that we're discussing here, that the government needs to consult people and before coming up with their strict laws and all. Now, we know that in our country today, the best bidder, even if it's a swamp, takes the day, right? Regardless, not putting into perspective the kind of biodiversity loss that we shall face. So if you have the monies, the best bidder takes it all. Now my question to you is, do you think, or is it the right time for us to maybe come up, as she put it, stringent policies that would prevent people or investors from going to ecologically grounds that could possibly have effect on biodiversity or that would lead to biodiversity loss? Do you think it's that time that we need to come up with such legislations that avoid us affecting the environment?
Well, first of all, it's not true that the EP or the Environment Parliament is only focused on the human development vis-a-vis environmental conservation. Well, the Environment Parliament is a citizen-led campaign that is focusing on getting views, collection of views and opinions of people that are grossly affected by the environment on how they would like the environment to be managed. And in this regard, we hold sub-regional meetings whereby people collect views from various sub-regions that culminate into what we call the national parliament, that they bring to discuss and table to the legislators, stakeholders and the policymakers, including the executive. So we are also focused on seeing that what is really the missing linkage and gap between the policies that are currently existing and the needs of the people at the grassroots. In this regard, you will see that the discussions that happen at Parliament that we shall later launch through what we call the Citizens Environment Compact. It will be a document that will be used as a lobbying tool to table citizens' views on what they would like to be the policies, what measures would they like to see implemented amidst in their communities, so that they can fully be participating in those measures. So the stringent measures we are talking about, we have a view at Tree Green Foundation that they cannot come from the policymakers or from the top. They can only be generated from the citizens, from the ghettos, from those that are grossly affected, to the national parliament, to the legislators, to the policymakers. So hence the Environment Parliament. Well, we talked about the directive by the president. I would like to recommend him for having at least had that foresight. But it would have been better and understandable. Why do people, amidst the existing laws, continue to cut down those trees? That means that if they are able to violate the existing laws, including using the police itself, they are going to do the same to disobey the directive. This is because there has not been a linkage between the people that are actually involved in charcoal burning and the policymakers or the executive. That whereas we are pushing policies laws and legislations down to the people's throats. What are their opinions on how they would have seen this environment be managed better? So when we established the Environment Parliament, was to illuminate the views of the people at the grassroots. So that if a stringent legislation comes, it should be tailored to the needs of the people. We agree that the people that are faced with floods in the Rwenzori sub-region, their issues are different from those that are in Bukedi and Bududa or Bugisu sub-region, because they are all environmental disasters that happen every year. But the causes are different. The approaches to solving those problems are different. So if we organize meetings, we organize workshops and sensitization campaigns to collect these views, to understand the perspective of the local people tailored in their various regions, we are able to come up with a comprehensive policy that is stringent enough, that is all cross-cutting. So we submit and we continuously argue that any policy that is existing at the moment, it should be tailored towards the needs of the people, since they are the actual beneficiaries of these policies. They are the actual polluters, and they are the people that are going to suffer most when the environment reacts. Yes.
Okay. From your submission, I pick the view. I'll still stick with you. I pick the view that those stringent policies are necessary.
Yes.
And being necessary, we also need to pick them from the views of the people.
Yes.
And having those stringent laws means that we shall conserve the environment. But now my question to you is, we are in the fast ever growing world that economic growth is necessary, considering our GDP. So how can you harmonize such stringent laws and economic growth or human progress?
Human progress and the economy. I will give an example of the world's most polluters. They are Germany and the USA. The only way they realize that they grow amidst the growing economy, amidst the needs of the people, and they need to preserve the economy, and the midst to preserve the environment, we must at the utmost make sure that we guide the development that towards environmental conservation. That's why we hear about issues of clean energy. You'll find that they are trying to move. They say that we cannot stop the production of vehicles, but we can bring the ones that are emitting clean energy. We cannot run away from people that are producing plastics, but at least they can reduce all the thickness or the kind of chemicals they are using. So in Uganda's context, we must first of all acknowledge and accept that people will at the earliest opportunity violate these laws on environment. But we should also not go to the extreme in enforcing these stringent measures. We must put measures that are growing with the trend of human needs. If there is need for oil and gas as it is at the moment, what measures are we going to put in place that, whereas there is drilling of oil, the environment is practically preserved? Are we going to what mechanisms are we going to engage to make sure that the drilling takes place, but it is not at the detriment of the environment? But if we choose to say that drilling of oil will stop, you will find that who pays the piper will call the tune. The oil companies will have more money to finance their agenda. The local people in those areas will find themselves at the detriment. But if there are certain gazetted areas where oil drilling, where such activities are taking place, plus what I talked about earlier, the people contributing to pollution must have a significant contribution at the same time in conserving the environment, and it will be by law. And we are pushing to inform the public. Human development is not an enemy to environment conservation. They work hand in hand. And for environment conservation, climate change to move in a positive direction, it must acknowledge the growth and the change in technology, human needs, and the nature of human character. They will always want to modify the environment to suit their growing trend as they are in at the moment.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Regina, from Council Sadat's submission, he says, as a quote, measures growing with trend of human need. Now, as we're coming up with a stringent clause, we need to adopt measures that are growing with trend of human need. Now, I want you to explore the perspective of community participation or participation of the locals, of young people, considering that our population is greatly young people between the ages of 14 to 30, 35. That is largely young. Now, we are the young generation, and we are the ones that are facing these adverse effects of climate change. You work with Tree Adoption Uganda, and from the name Tree Adoption, I would assume that you possibly do a lot of tree planting. You do a lot of afforestation. Now, as you're doing the afforestation and tree planting, do you put into perspective inclusion in terms of having young people on board and various age brackets on board, vis-a-vis seeing the aspect that you're also achieving sustainable development, in that you are not entering too much into the spaces that people stay in?
Yes, maybe I did not mention Tree Adoption Uganda is a youth-led NGO.
Yes.
And most of the work that we do, actually, in fact, all the work we do, they are youth involved at every stage. Be it in the ghetto, be it back in the villages, be it in town, when we have come to discuss, say, the Energy Charter Treaty. So all the work we do is centered around youth, because I mean, they're the bigger population, they're the most available, they are the most equipped and skilled. If you will realize that in the current era in which we live, youth today are the most skilled.
True.
In tech, in knowledge, because most of the youth today are able to read. And when they are not able to read, they are able to absorb through what I'll call edutainment. If someone comes and puts up a skit there without even saying a word, a youth will be able to tell that, oh, when that lady or that gentleman did this, this is what they meant. They meant that deforestation is bad. So all throughout, we work with youth. We believe youth are an asset to this country, to the world, and to the future. So we work with them everywhere. Maybe if you could remind me of the second part of your question.
Second part of the question, apart from the aspect of inclusion, is how best are you then, if you're working with the young people, do you, since today also discussing the aspect of economic development, when you are reaching out and planting the trees, do you like have a gazetted area say that this is entirely for trees, or we shouldn't cut them, we should just focus on putting trees there?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. And yes, Tree Adoption Uganda, as you hear in the name, you heard right. We are a tree growing organization, mainly with the aid of technology. Now that is a story for another day. And when we are growing trees, there are various forms and formats. There is afforestation, there is reforestation. We actually reforest quite a number of forests. Then there is agroforestry, in a way that we are going to come and equip or support a smallholder farmer to grow these trees alongside the other crops. For example, when you look at a tree like mahogany, how many years will it take? Will someone just plant that tree or grow that tree and sit there and eat nothing and just stare on? Actually, most of the work we do with the smallholder farmers all over Uganda, we plant all over Uganda and grow trees. By growing trees, I mean we need to supervise these trees and ensure that they grow in order to achieve what we want them to achieve. So when we have those indigenous trees, a farmer has their piece of land, let them grow their crops, their food crops, their other crops alongside these trees. It is hitting two birds or so many birds with one stone. And the smallholder farmers may not necessarily be youth. They are all of all ages.
Inclusivity.
Yes, that is inclusivity, and I think that is fair enough.
All right. Mr. Roy, I will pick up with you just after the break.
Okay.
Thank you very much, the viewers, for watching us right until this time. Today we are discussing World Environment Day. Should nature conservation take precedence over human development? So stay with us. Right after the break, we shall come back and we dive deeper into tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Hello viewers, welcome back from that short break. Right before the break, we were discussing World Environment Day. Should nature conservation take precedence over human development and human progress? So just before we broke off, Ms. Regina was talking about the aspect of youth engagement and inclusivity in the projects that they are pursuing at Tree Adoption Uganda. Now, my question to you, Roy, is how can local communities, particularly the young people in the ghetto and all over Uganda, be actively involved in the decision-making processes regarding development projects and to ensure their concerns are actually heard?
Now, like the word told you, through the engagement of them one-to-one, yeah, we've come to a point like somewhere we've started creating some kind of, it's kind of like art, whereby we use certain, deposits, for example, like we can correct some tins, plastics, and then the bigger ones, we even plant there some trees, because remember, in the ghettos, people don't have bigger pieces of land where they are going to plant trees. But we can create kind of like a fashion kind of garden, or we can even do like a wall planting, wall tree planting, whereby we create some gauzes, then put in their tins and put there some few trees that can naturally grow in the tins, so as we can also compete with the people who pollute the environment. Yeah, so that we release fresh air, they also release the bad air, so that we can compete with them in the small areas we are, because we don't have land where we are going to plant all those trees, but still in the small lands that we have, or the small spaces we have, we've tried to create kind of our own forests. Yeah, in the teens, so that's kind of like engaging them, because, you know, like she said, that the youth are very creative. Yeah, we come up with all sorts of designs to make sure that at least, even if you have like, we can grow a forest on the wall, yeah, in tins, yeah, so that we can also compete with those people who pollute the environment. Yeah.
Impressive.
No.
Thank you. I would like to engage with you, Councillor Sadat.
Yes.
Listening to Roy's story and what people and communities are doing to combat or mitigate the aspect of climate change brings me to what the idea behind Environment Parliament is, that you pick the citizens and pick their perspectives and engage them in conversations. And that is something that the Environment Parliament has been doing and that is still doing. Now, right before we went into the break, we discussed numerous issues, right from how can we strike a balance between nature conservation and human growth and development, among others. Now, right now, I want us to go into international organizations. Put it into perspective, because we as Uganda or as Africa, we are not the biggest polluters. We are not, but we are still affected. Right now, I want us to take this conversation globally. So I want you to help us put into perspective, what role should the international organizations and agreements play in regulating and guiding development projects with respect to environmental conservation? Put into perspective our plea that we are not the greatest emitters, but still have to be in the fight against this climate change.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I do not agree with the narrative that since Uganda is one of the lowest emitters and environmental destroyers, we should not put in the much efforts like other economies that are high up there in the ladder of environmental degradation. When we look at the UN, the United Nations Forum on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, you'll find that the discussion is around how can we, as the entire globe, fight for Mother Earth that we are all living as, so that it can be sustained. Whether you're a small polluter, you are a small emitter, your contribution is significant to the world emissions. And in this regard, we have only one Earth. If you claim that the people that are in Germany, the people that are in Australia, the people that are in China are the ones that should care more about this issue of environment because they emit more of the gases than we in Africa, it sends a bad message, since the decisions that are being made there indirectly have an effect on us. I agree that the role of the international organization is to spur the direction of environment conservation by taking a clean and clear example from how African countries are trying so hard to preserve Mother Nature. When you look at the countries that are affected mostly by hurricanes and their responses towards those floods and waves, you realize that the direction they are taking is to see that let the entire world not reach the situation or the ignorance that we exhumed before reaching this situation. So the direction they are driving the country is that since you are still a low polluter, since your levels of environmental degradation are still low, please keep them lower, not reach the levels that we are at. In this regard, the direction and the contribution that they are making is to direct funding to sensitization that environment degradation, climate change is real. I told you there is an entire discussion taking place in the world whereby some elites, very educated people, state that climate change is a myth, and they have reasons to justify that, and they will state that if Earth is having a problem, there are still other planets, and we believe that life can survive on other planets. So you will find that mostly in the communication and funding towards awareness, this is where the international organizations, international community should come up to first of all fight the ignorance amongst our people, or amongst the people that the decisions, the actions they are taking actually directly or indirectly contribute to the kind of environment that we are having. And in Africa, we should fight vehemently the opinions and the discussions regarding that, since we are low emitters, our climate change rates are very low. We should at least not put in that much effort and leave it to other players. We should fight this as a whole, as a globe, since Earth is only one, and we are surviving on it as humans as a whole. So the discussions, even when you read about the theme of the World Environment Day, the previous theme, it was talking about one Earth, saying that humans, regardless of race, color, and origin, we must all work together.
True.
We must all see that climate change is at the minimal levels. Our governments, our people must be sensitized, must be informed. Therefore, funding should be directed towards policies that are tailored towards creating more awareness, informing the people on how they can have a environment-friendly activities, and at the same time, they can be in a position to preserve the environment and live harmoniously with the existing environment.
Perfect. Thank you. It's true that regardless of whether you're a low or high emitter, the fight against climate change should be an all-hands-on approach.
Yes.
Ms. Regina, I want to ask you, you spoke about earlier on before we went for the break, your knowledge of the SDGs seem to be quite there. So now, since we're discussing nature conservation and human development, now, looking into Uganda's perspective and Africa, which is greatly affected with poverty, high levels of unemployment, is there a possibility of economic development and poverty alleviation coexisting with environmental protection?
Yes. Like we have been discussing previously and from the start of it all, there has to be a marriage of all these things. I'll call it a marriage, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But I believe that will best bring out what I want to discuss today. There has to be an interlinkage. There has to be a meeting of all these things. Otherwise, one will be left behind. One will seem to move a little bit ahead, but then that is not the truth, because when one appears to move a little bit ahead, because this other SDG has not been developed and been left behind, it will catch up with this one, and though it is a mess if these things are not working hand in hand. And I would like to inform you that there is a reason as to why there are so many policies, there are so many, even the arms of government, they all work hand in hand together. And when one advances on the other, then the other might fail. And eventually, this one that has advanced on it might also fail. Is there a possibility that this can one day work hand in hand together and be achieved on the same level? Well, that is a very important discussion, that whose answer we might not really realize. But the whole purpose of the goals is to presume or hope or intend that one day we might achieve all these in all their unity, in all their importance and rightfulness. One day we might achieve them.
One day. Just on that one day. Your argument is social equity versus economic growth. And with economic growth, that means you also know, let's say we achieve economic growth. Economic growth comes with various disparities. I'm going to pick one.
Yes.
Economic growth may come with economic disparities, that we have people who are wealthy, people who are poor. And we are bringing the aspect of social equity that we need to consider. We need to consider everyone is employed, so we need to fight poverty. But we know that the reality is, in achieving economic growth, not everyone moves at the same pace as we predict it or as it is by the book. So what interventions can be done? Because that one day may come, but we may have high levels of inequality in society. So what interventions can be done to mitigate such challenges?
Thank you so much. Yes, those challenges are many, and actually they are some of the biggest hindrance to the achievements that we want to achieve, and also the goals that we want to achieve, including the SDG goals. That imbalance. See, the wealthy when you are wealthy, there are so many things you can achieve, including buying your way out of, I don't know how to say this, including buying justice for yourself. When you are wealthy, something like that can pose to happen. But when you are poor, you might not even approach a table to discuss an issue that concerns you. There are so many examples, especially here in Uganda and even abroad. Look at COP, the Conference of Parties. Yes, this is a conference which we know is what discusses the core of climate change and the solutions that we are supposed to have. But how many people have made it to COP or even heard about it? Yes, they might have heard. Those who have heard, and the best they can do is to review what COP has said, speak or advocate about it, and that is it. Might they ever make it to COP to have a one-on-one discussion with the parties and to say that, in Uganda, where I come from, we are actually suffering because you did not pay for the loss you made. See, there is that imbalance. So I've given you the general picture of the imbalance. So what can we do? Yes, what can we do? The poor who are there in that imbalance, it is incumbent on them to know that whereas they are there and maybe making decisions or doing whatever else they are doing, probably for themselves, they need to know that there are also other people who do not have that privilege, but maybe they need what they are receiving or discussing more than they themselves. Which takes me back to council submission. Go back to the grassroots. In anything you do, facilitate or empower the people who are working in the grassroots, because the grassroots is where the actual problem is. If you are going to finance capacity building, then let it be for the people who are going to go to the grassroots to collect the information that we need to change policies. Yes, if we are going to empower people who are doing climate mitigation strategies and adaptation, then we need to we need to empower those people who are going down to the grassroots, the people who are most affected, so that the general picture is understood. And when it is brought to the table, both the wealthy and the poor, in all their capacities and in all ways they have been affected, all their issues can be discussed and reconciled in an equitable manner.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to engage with you, Roy. Her last statement says in an equitable manner. Conversations relating to climate change are oftentimes tailored to a specific sect of people and community. When you find out, oftentimes when people are being invited to conferences, they invite you basing on which organization do you affiliate yourself with, among others. That leaves the affected persons down in the village not involved. Now, you spread the gospel of clean energy, climate change. Speaking and airing your views right now, what do you think the decision makers need to do differently to involve everyone in the community to be engaged in these conversations, not to be in a way that is segregatory, in a manner that doesn't possibly have you and the others represented?
Yeah, me actually, I think putting it to most especially our local leaders, these people should actually, if in case, in any way, the government could support them, like probably once in a month, they carry out like community meetings, so that at least, because it's very easy for them to even invite big people, the so-called big people, okay, and then they engage the community and see their views when it comes to saving the environment. Me, I think that would even be better, because when you, like they said, my fellow panelists, when you get the information from the ground, it's actually very easy for you to do a decision that will benefit the entire communities. Yeah, because it's not like these things are going to come from heaven and then for you think for the what, for the community, that now like you guys are not going to use charcoal. No, first come to the ground, ask them which other better option could you guys manage, because it would give you first-hand information from those people who are being affected. Other than, because at times it even beats my understanding when NEMA comes and beats up people who have like grown, let me say, yams in the small swamps, but it leaves the other guy who has constructed a factory in a bigger swamp, because at least this guy has grown yams. Yams are also what? Plants. But the other person who has put sand or other gravel into the what? In the bigger swamps, then you leave them, but you beat the other guy, the person who has grown a yam, and yet it's also a plant. It actually beats my understanding. So if there is that community like that lead, starting from ground, like let me say the chairmans, if they probably could carry out community meetings, probably like once in a month, they will gather much more information that would even help in building a better what? Environment.
All right, thank you. He brings a very interesting insight into this conversation, which will lead me to asking counsel. His analogy is, we see a body like National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, which is mandated to go ahead and protect the environment, penalizing individuals who are growing yams in the swamps and letting go individuals who have constructed industries onto swamps. Now, my question to you is, this is my first question, maybe first ask the second one. First question to you is, corruption, has it eaten up the fight against climate change? Because if a body like NEMA is doing such, should we then be worried that are we trying to achieve the sustainable development that we are trying to discuss in tonight's debate?
Well, corruption is prevalent, and it is cross-cutting across all sectors of Uganda and government agencies. However, I want to look at it in a different perspective.
Okay.
The National Environment Management Authority has the mandate to preserve, conserve, and also to uphold the environment as it is. Therefore, the distinction between a low person that is degrading the environment at a low scale and the one at a high scale should not be the basis of our discussion. We should first of all admit that if you are planting yams in a water catchment area, it is illegal. It is not illegal. It is not legal. It is illegal. At the same time, you should also accept that whereas I am doing it on a small scale, I am also doing damage to the environment. Therefore, before you apportion blame to the highest polluter or environment degrader, you should accept that actually also my action is leading to climate change, is destroying this environment. Before we blame corruption, you should first of all look inwards. Yes, is the act of planting yams contributing to environmental conservation or degradation? If it contributes to degradation, therefore NEMA is within its rights to uphold you. Second, it is establishing a factory in that very swamp also disastrous to the economy? No, disastrous to the environment? Yes, it is. But when you look at the laws that are in place, they are not designed for categories of people. They are designed to deter or any person, any individual organization. So if you plant eucalyptus in a swamp, the same full force of the law will apply to you as it applies to one that is establishing a factory. The only advantage the one that is establishing a factory may have is that when the time comes to pay for to be punished for their transgressions, they have an option of paying a fine, so that they can compensate for the damage they are doing to the environment. You may not be in a position to have that amount of money, and you will end up saying that because for me I've been stopped from continuing my activity, they have been corrupted. But in any event, there are administrative fines for whoever who deliberately knows that this is a gazetted swampy area, carries out any form of economic activity in that area, being it growing of yams, growing of eucalyptus, establishing of a factory. But because and I'm saying we Africans, we have a victim mentality.
True.
We always believe that since I am doing it at a smaller scale, I'm not supposed to be punished. Yet they are all others. We are all equal before and under the law.
But is that the case?
It is the case based on the perspective. Because if you are first of all acknowledge that yes, what I'm doing is wrong. Also what the other person is doing is wrong. The point of convergence will be to remedy the wrong we are doing. Not saying that since for me, my wrong is at a smaller scale than the other, we are all wrongdoers. And that is the first point that we must move forward. That is why we are talking about the Citizens Environment Compact. It is to bring these issues into perspective. Yes, that whereas we are all destroying this environment, but the scale differs. Can't we be judged differently? But as it is right now, the law is this whoever, it doesn't distinguish whether you are from the ghetto, whether you are from the Kololo. The moment you violate the established principles and an administrative fine comes into place. She talked about regulations and the section, was it 174 of the NEMA Act that was putting up a dustbin in the vehicles. It is a policy in regards to littering. But you will find that people, at their own volition, he buys a banana, peels it, and throws the peel outside. But when court will say, no, for me, I've just thrown one banana. But what of the other one that is throwing a huge can of plastic? Why don't you first go for the other one? In any event, you are all littering. You are all breaking the law. You should first of all acknowledge that, yes, whereas I am breaking the law, but not to the magnitude of the other one. My fine or my punishment should be lower. So the discussion that I'm driving at is that all acts are wrong, but there should be paid for, and there should be punishments for all, but we can only disagree or agree on the magnitude of reparation is not throwing everything back to corruption.
Okay.
Actually, moderator, it takes me back when we started the program, that behavior change, that we should start with behavior change. That's why I told you it's better when you engage a person on mouth to mouth or on word to word, because it's all about behavior change. Because like Africans, the way we are, like the example I gave you, you find someone throwing a bottle but complaining that the other guy burning the bush is the one doing worse. But remember, you're in a car, you've thrown that bottle. The bottle might be even worse than the other guy burning the bush, because that bottle will make that soil infertile for life. Yeah.
Council.
Yes.
I was still with you.
Yes.
The discussion right now looks to be focusing more on the person down there in the village. Yeah. That's since I am doing something on a small scale, I do not have a big impact on the environment as someone who has a factory in Namambe. Now, I want us to look into the aspect of tech, because we cannot have we cannot talk about nature conservation, economic growth without mentioning the aspect of technology and innovation. Now, my question to you is, which I'll also push forward later on to Regina, is how can technology and innovation be leveraged to support both nature conservation and human development?
The leveraging of technology is through actions of the population and of the citizens. Well, there is a documentary that is trying to advocate for clean energy. It describes the time you take in planting and growing a tree and the seconds you use in destroying that tree to get charcoal. Vis-a-vis, it shows you that with the use of gas as a clean energy, you can actually achieve the same purpose of cooking. But the only discrepancy that is yet to be achieved is the affordability of the clean energy. So whereas we're talking about technology, we should always be also cognizant of the fact that the people that we are preaching to these alternatives, they must be affordable. They must be in a position to afford these alternatives. For instance, if you deter them from using charcoal, what is the best possible alternative that is cheap for them to be in position to achieve the same purpose of cooking? So the technology and advancement in technology must also understand the nature and financial capacity of the population. And that is why you'll find that again, there are other smaller gas emitting mechanisms that people are employing. For instance, you'll find that people are making briquettes, but briquettes are made out of. You see, you realize. So you'll find that the recycling of the already existing would be remnants of the factories and the likes. If they are recycled through the use of technology, they can be now used to the benefit of the society. So the technology, the advancement in technology should have a perspective of affordability. That whereas we are designing alternatives to environment degradation, we must, in the same vein, have alternatives that are not very expensive to be adopted by the population. You'll find that the people are talking of there are some low charcoal burning stoves. There are some those that can afford can use gas. Those that can, the advancement in technology must in any event be affordable to the people. A case in point, when we were at the inaugural Environment Parliament, a lady asked, why should I not cut down the tree and cook food for my child at this moment when I cannot afford gas? Isn't there any other ways I can maybe use? If I was cutting two trees to get charcoal, I cut one. As I also grow in my economic means to be in a position to afford gas. The argument was centering on, so there was an extreme side saying no, cutting down a tree is already bad in its sense. But the issue, and there is an alternative, which is gas. So you can, our submission is you cannot force people to embrace an expensive form of technology, which they absolutely cannot afford, and they leave a free resource. Because they will take trees, cutting them, gathering firewood as a free resource. They incur nothing. So the sensitization, the advancement and creativity in technology, we are of a view that it should also be cost effective, user friendly, and at the same time affordable to all the people so that they can adopt such alternatives.
Okay. Ms. Regina, listening to Councillor Sadat, it brings out the aspect of user-friendly, cost-effective, and affordability. I'll still stick to the question. How can we use technology and innovation to leverage, to be leveraged to support both nature conservation and human development?
Thank you so much, Moderator Drake. Technology is very broad, and as we go, it is actually flowing on a very fast-paced rate.
True.
Today, you actually realize now there are so many things we can do today. I'll give you an example of Twitter Spaces. Every other week there are Twitter Spaces these days. When Zoom was introduced, it caused a lot of hullabaloo and everyone could not understand. So where is the microphone? Are they actually seeing me? Can they actually hear me? See, between the Zoom era and I just want to call the Zoom era of Uganda, the time of COVID, when a bigger number of people actually got to realize that there is something called Zoom and you can have all these things online. The Zoom era of 2020 and now is so different. People have even advanced from Zoom and are doing different things, broad things. People have started YouTube channels. They have done all sorts of things. Technology is really broad, and for the people that I have seen that are interested in themselves in learning how it works and how to use it, they're actually benefiting a lot. I just want to give you an example of Roy and the people he works with. Yes. See, the poor Roy meets in the ghetto might not have gone to school, but they have understood that when I grow my forest along a wall, then I can also compete with those people who are actually doing other things in environment. And how do we know those other people that are doing really great things in environment? They have come up and spoken about them using what? Technology, using all this media, using all that. So these people, the ghetto youth who have not gone to school and cannot write, but when you come and practically explain and say, you only need a smartphone, which the biggest percentage of youth can use now. When you have a smartphone and you have YouTube, do you know that this number of people can see the kind of work that you're doing? It is really broad, and there are so many ways we can use it. We need to start slowly, yes, but we must be really interested in also knowing its benefits and how we can reap from them. Specific examples of how we can use technology, I'll give you some of the few that I'm really familiar with and I have really appreciated. See now in tree growing or in tree planting, so many people plant trees, but when you want to talk about the actual growth or the growth of the trees, not so many people want to have that discussion because there is no tree growth that happens. People are distributing trees instead. They go, they have their 1,000 trees, they say, we planted those 1,000 trees. And that's that. But with tree growth, you want to know that you planted your 1,000 trees in Nakaseke, on this polygon, on this, I beg your pardon, and these are the coordinates for that area in which I planted. And anytime, using satellite imagery, I can track where those trees are, and once in a while, I might go there physically and look at them and see. But in the comfort of my home, I can be able to read and know that there is something that has changed with the forest that I planted, but you are not there. Now that is what technology can do. Those are some of the amazing things that technology can do for environment. And what I was describing, planting a tree, getting its geo-coordinates, knowing the species, where it has been planted, all that I've been telling you is part of the Tree Adoption app. Now all that is technology. Yes, those are some of the amazing things that technology can do.
Impressive.
And so many other things that we cannot explore today, but are rising up, and it is up to us, especially the youth, to interest ourselves. I mean, we have all the advantage. We have the time. Some youth don't have families. So what are you using that time for? interest yourself in these things, because the future is now. The future is technology. It will just change a bit, but it is happening now.
True. Thank you. Interesting insights. Mr. Roy, before we conclude, kindly give us your insights on how best you have been using technology to best give information, the word to word that you've mentioned, to the little youth down there.
Because now, like me, I always watch YouTube channels to get those DIYs for what? For like, well, now I can be creative in terms of growing plants around me. So that's the kind of technology I bring down to the ground through me watching YouTube channels, watching the DIYs, then bring those skills back to what? To these guys and teach them that, yeah, still we can get our bottles, all these other plastics that we always throw away, still create a certain kind of design on the wall, and then grow there some kind of plants, so that at least we can also increase on the what? On the fresh air that we breathe. Because of recent, I saw that Kampala is one of the
Most
cities
polluted
in Africa that is most polluted.
air quality.
Yeah, with poor air quality. So me, I always do that by watching the videos, because I have a smartphone and at least I can access internet than the other guys. And then on the other part, for example, this one, I always send it to the government. You see, Uganda has like enough electricity, but if you look at the percentage of people who are connected, you will get surprised, because the last time I read in the news, it was around 1,600 megawatts. But on the grid, the people who use the electricity are like 2%, the funny thing, and yet we have too much electricity. Then I ask myself, where does the other electricity go? At least if it was brought to the person, like at a cheaper cost, probably, trust me, people would no longer use charcoal. But still, even the few people who are using it is still a bit high, because if the unit is at around 800.
1,000.
Yeah, probably 1,000. Now
Someone's
imagine
meal.
how many people can afford that when it comes to the what? To getting the option of charcoal and electricity. Yeah. If the government would at least make sure that every person is connected, trust me, the other energy that we ain't using, we would be using it to cook food. Yeah. So as to be a better option for the firewood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have reached the end of our show, but right before we just end it, I'll still start with you, Roy, as we come this side. What are your parting shots, or what are your final insights to tonight's conversation?
My parting shots would be that we, every human being, should go back to his heart and say, oh, his or her heart, that this world we don't own this world or this earth. Instead, we belong to earth. Anything that is bad to earth, we are creating another problem for another generation. So we should go back and change our behaviors in terms of creating a better environment for other generations to also survive. Yeah, those are my parting shots.
Thank you. Powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful. Yes, Miss Regina.
I'll restrict my parting shots to something I've not talked about since we started, and that is the Run for Climate. Tree Adoption Uganda is organizing Run for Climate on June 18th. Yes, and we plan that the proceeds that come from that run will plant 100,000 trees this year. So please join us, dear panelists and our listeners. Join us on that day. Ticket is 20,000 shillings only. On our website, www.treeadoption.org, and we shall be happy to run together for a better climate.
Impressive.
For the whole world.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Council.
Yes, my parting shots are that whereas this world was, earth was given to us by God to enjoy it the way we feel comfortable, we want to, but we should do it in recognition that it is the only one we have. Destroying it will also lead to our destruction. Therefore, we must make sure that we preserve the only earth we have so that we can be in position to enjoy it as we like. Thank you.
Thank you. You have heard from the panelists today. You've seen the conversations we've had. Tonight we're discussing World Environment Day. Should nature conservation take precedence over human development projects? Thank you for watching. Tonight I was joined by a very distinguished panel. Thank you very much, Mr. Roy, Ms. Regina, Councillor Sadat, for taking time to join us to discuss tonight's conversation. As you all know, it takes all of us to combat climate change. So together we can. Let us do it and fight climate change. Thank you very much. Same time next week. See you again.